a lot of hands-on things to show, so I'm going to ask Richard kindly to help switch back and forth between the slides and seeing me with some of the things that I'm going to share with you. So the first slide is really just an introduction to today, a little bit about myself. I want to share with you that we have a tremendous university here in Florida in the US, the University of Florida. We have a honeybee research and extension lab, which I hope you all can visit someday. It's unlike any other, probably in the country or the world. We're very lucky to have it. And that's one of the places that I first became familiar with honey shows and preparing entries for honey shows. So I've been through all of the programs that they have to offer there for Master Beekeeper, as well as their Honey Judge program, and that's a lot of what I prepared for you today. Honey shows are a lot of fun. They can also be intense, so this much time in advance to prepare for a honey show, potentially slated for December in your region, is wonderful. I don't know a lot about your nectar flows when you're beeing and what types of honeys they produce, but I'm really interested in learning about them. So I hope after some of you will reach out and talk to me about your honeys and your bees and the things that you enjoy doing. That again is another really fun aspect for me, is making these connections and having these relationships. And I look forward to sharing a little bit with you today about some of the honeys that we have here in Florida and some of those that I've experienced in the country and around the world with the different honey shows that I've gotten the opportunity to participate in as an entrant or a judge or even a steward or just a volunteer. All those positions are extremely exciting. So yeah, if you're okay, Richard, just navigating away for a few minutes, and then we'll, when it's ready time, get to the first slide. Let's just go to a video so I can share some hands-on. So for today, we have a lot of material to cover, and I really want to make sure I send you off with as much information as possible. And I have a lot of things staged here. I'm in a little area of my shop. I just opened a small cafe and retail honey shop here in Stuart, Florida. And the back part of my shop is where we bottle all of our honey. So you may see some tanks or boxes or interesting things around the room. This is where we do our work. So let me start by working on extracted honey. Extracted honey is a really big class in all of the honey shows around the world. Extracted honey is probably one of the most popular things we as beekeepers get asked about produce. And I have a passion for all of the other products of Hive and increasing the awareness of them. So I'm excited from the last opportunity I had to meet with this organization and all of the talks that were presented and how the value-added products of the Hive were brought about. And honey shows are a really interesting way to also boost that enthusiasm and get that awareness out there for your consumers. And if you enter a honey show, this is a really great opportunity for you to showcase your honey if it wins an award with your customers, or your beeswax, or your art, or your photography, or any other thing that you decide you'd like to enter in the honey show. So this is some of the benefits of entering the honey show. Extracted honey is definitely one of the biggest classes in the honey shows. Some of the honey shows that happen in the UK and England in particular have a long-standing history, well over 100 years, like the National Honey Show. I've only attended it one time, but it was a really fantastic opportunity. I recommend it to anyone if you can fit it in your budget, when it's safe to travel, and when they're actually holding it in person again. I would highly recommend visiting that. And if you could just see the hundreds and hundreds of jars of honeys lined up on the show benches with, throughout several rooms, you would be in awe at how much work and effort it took to not only have all these entries ready by each entrant, but the actual show and the show staff, and just how grand of an event it really is. Extracted honey, a lot of us have different methods the way we keep our bees, different species of honeybees, and then different floral resources, both nectar, pollen, and other compounds, volatiles and other things that definitely affect the scent and the flavor and what the customer or the consumer experiences when they eat our honey. From the bees to the extraction process, there's a whole nother thing that happens. If you decide to go with a centrifugal or mechanical process for extracting honey, that's not bad, and it's very common. But for the sake of preparing an entry for a honey show, I highly recommend using a more gentle process to retain all those volatiles and different fragrances that the bees have brought into the hive through the nectar and the pollen. And in fact, if you're going to extract with a typical extractor, the extracted honey that you get from just cutting your cappings and allowing them to strain in a bucket is probably your best honey for entering in a honey show. So when you cut the cappings off your comb, whether you use 100% natural comb or you decide to use a piece of plastic foundation, whatever your choice is, those cappings that you cut off, the honey that drains off of them is going to be chock full of goodness and not put through the process of being spun and air introduced and some volatile compounds brought out. So that's my first really giant tip of the day. Your cappings honey or your crush and strain honey from natural comb is going to be the most prized honey for entering in a honey show for extracted honey. So don't let that word extracted fool you. You can do it in a way that suits, and I think you'll find that if you tasted the extracted honey and your cappings honey side by side from the very same frames, you might also notice a difference. So I would posit to you to give that a try when you do your next extraction, and see if you notice a difference in your cappings honey versus your extracted honey from your centrifugal extractor. So that's the honey that I would recommend using. Preparing the honey is a whole nother matter. Depending on your climate, your region, the time of year, and when the honey is extracted is all going to affect how this honey is going to be per show, which is why I mentioned earlier that it's really nice to have such a great amount of time between now and when your show is actually scheduled. Our first honeys are due to be extracted in March, and those are certainly going to be wonderful honeys to enter into shows sometime this year. But I would be concerned if I was going to be entering a honey show in the wintertime, because a lot of our honeys that we extracted earlier are starting to develop crystals naturally, just because we don't introduce, and some of those types of honeys that we're extracting here in Florida have a very high amount of sucrose in them, so they do tend to granulate. Depending on the nectar source and the honey that you're producing and your region and your temperature, the timing of your honey show is all going to affect how your entry is going to be made. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do. This is a really cool slide that Richard pulled up of the light extracted honey. And you'll see 3 jars there, which of the classes we're going to talk about today. And what's really neat about that is all 3 jars need to be exactly the same for this competition. It shows a skill level that the entrant has achieved in both on the jar, making sure that the level is filled to the same amount in each jar, that it's the type of honey, and then there's a little more, and we'll discuss that in a second. So if I was preparing extracting for a show in December, doing that for this show, I would start with a springtime or summertime honey, and I would keep my cappings honey in a separate container, and I would keep it in a fairly warm environment, not hot, but warm. And if you don't have access to a warm environment, that's okay, because you can gently warm the honey prior to the show. I'm going to just stand up for a minute and put a little bit of larger container just to give you a visual. If Richard can switch away from the slide, just give me 1 second. Hopefully you can see this okay. This is a 48-ounce glass jar, and what I have sitting on top of it is a cotton filter that's attached to a handle with a metal ring. And this cotton filter is a very fine particle cotton filter, but it's something that I was able to purchase at the grocery store. It's not too difficult to find, and it's not unlike a coffee filter or something you would use to strain out coffee, which you can use a paper coffee filter. But if you can find cloth, sometimes it works much better. The other thing you can use, believe it or not, is just a t-shirt. So a t-shirt that has a really nice cotton that you've washed several times because you don't want any fibers to come out, but you can make a little filter out of it over jar. And it's going to take days for the honey just put in here to come through this filter. And that's exactly what you want. You want it to take a really long time, and you want to make sure every bit of particulate is removed from the honey. And we're also looking to let the honey settle. So it gives a chance for what your honey sometimes looks like when you first pour it and you introduce some air bubbles. You might see some fine particulate wax. You might see some bee parts or just other debris that is very fine ended up in the honey, which would otherwise be amazing for us and we don't mind consuming. But you know, when we're doing a show like this and we're preparing, these entries are, the judges are looking for a very clear honey uniformity. So that's something that you want to advance. Once you've gone through the process of filtering the honey in this way, you need to make way more than you need. So we'll go back to the 3 jars that we were in the slide. If you notice that they're all the same and each one is a pound or 60, you're going to want to prepare more than 3 pounds of honey, just so you have an adequate amount. So imagine preparing this entry for an upcoming show. My recommendation would be to make 5 jars of the same honey. The reason is, what if accidentally you missed a particle in the honey and you are examining them prior to the show? You go through the great trouble of getting these all perfect. You bring them to the show. You're sitting at the table, polished, ready for the show, and you notice a small speck of something. Using a flashlight, of course, this is very helpful, and this is what the judge is going to do too, is going to shine a light on each jar, and you notice something inside. Well, you really don't have time to correct that. So if you have an extra jar or 2, you're going to give yourself the advantage of success in getting that entry into the show and having a much better opportunity at winning because you've had the extra entry prepared. So that's another really important tip. Also, take note of the jar itself. It's very polished and shiny and clean looking. Bring extra jars with you. Just in case you have an issue with a jar, bring extra lids with you. The types of jars that are used for that particular show and competition are going to be noted in the rules. Some shows are very forgiving and have very little strictness in what type of jar or container is used. I'll give you an example. I attended Appomondia in Montreal 2 years ago. So prior to COVID, it was a really nice thing to be able to do. And I'm fondly reflecting on it because it's been a while since I've been able to travel. But I did visit the honey show staging area, which you're allowed to view after the judges have done all the judging and the awards have been given. And it's really nice when you do attend a conference where there's a honey show. The conference attendees can go in and look at everybody's entries and see who won, and it gets pretty exciting. But I do recall noting that the packaging that was required for the honeys was not very strict. There were plastic bottles used, all types, all sizes, all different caps. So don't be deterred by the information I'm sharing with you right now, because maybe with your first honey show there, you'll decide not to make it difficult and you'll have a little bit more leniency in the type of packaging that's used, because in fact, with COVID, it has been really hard for all of us to get some packaging both in glass and plastic right now. So that's another suggestion. But just so I can prepare you for other types of honey shows, you can notice here that these 3 jars are polished nicely. They're all the same, and they all have the same matching lid. It takes quite a bit of time to get the jars to look like that. A simple washing and drying is the first step. Again, make sure you wash and dry extra jars, and then use a flashlight and inspect each glass jar and look for your best glass. Years ago, glass was made differently and had very little flaws. We don't have the same acting quality glass now that we used to. A lot of our glass jars have some wrinkles, other little issues that don't affect the safety of the design and stand the test of time, but they may have some things that the judge might pick up. And so if there are hundreds of entries in a show and the judge has done all this work to sort out through them and find the best and is looking to see who has the first place, that one jar that had that little bubble or that little wrinkle in it could be the one thing that keeps you from winning your prize. So that's one other really important tip for you, is to pick your best glass and your best lids. Even the scratch on the lid could affect the outcome. Again, first honey shows for any organization, we recommend as judges, and having been part of different shows all over the world, we recommend a certain amount of leniency for people to feel encouraged and want to participate. But I want to share everything I can with you, because if you get excited about this, you may want to enter a show with a much more higher level of difficulty down the road. And I would feel disappointed if I didn't share with you how important it is to check each cap for scratches. And also with caps, you'll notice that some of them have what's considered a safety seal inside. Sometimes the plastic caps come with a liner. It's like almost like a foam material. When you squeeze the lid down hard on the jar to tighten it, that piece of foam will stick to the top of the jar. That's not desired for a honey show entry. When the judge opens the jar, there's two things they would like. One, they would like to not have to struggle to open the jar. So you want to tighten it, but not over tighten it. And two, that safety seal should be removed prior to bringing your entries to the show. Your honey so that you have more than you actually need when you go to prepare your entries. But we didn't really talk about what to do if your honey is starting to crystallize or is a little cloudy, or the moisture content. And those are all really important too. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about those three things. Using the concept.
Jennifer, just a quick one. I've got a couple of questions coming in. From Risha Allen. I think she's from Trinidad and Tobago. Is a cheesecloth suitable for filtering honey?
Cheesecloth has a much larger hole and will allow the finest debris to go through. I highly recommend a tighter fabric, like a cotton t-shirt or a cotton scarf or bandana, or something that is really tightly woven. Okay. Something that it takes a really long time for the honey to work its way through.
Okay, and she had a second follow-up question. What safe, non-toxic tips are there to deter ants from working area, honey and jars?
The best non-chemical method that we come up with is using a container of water, so like a water bath, which you can place your jars in. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the water bath now, because we were just starting to get into honey that might be cloudy or starting to crystallize.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, always. Please, okay. Anytime.
All right, take care. I hope that answers your question, Risha.
So now we're talking about the filtering again, and just to confirm, using something that will take a long time for your honey to travel through is going to give you the clearest honey that you could possibly want to put in a jar for the judges. So the longer it takes, the better it is. You could speed the process up with gentle heat. Gentle heat is a warm water bath, which you can place your jars in. You can place your jars in there prior to filling them, and that's also a nice way to introduce honey into the jar without bubbles. And when I say gentle heat, I'm talking like 100 to 110 degrees over the course of several days. Visiting